Thank you everybody for joining us this morning on our continuation of the Locked In Lunch and Learn series. I'm Julia Santagata, one of the automation managers here at Redundancy. Today's topic is a preview of Studio 5000 version 33, which is scheduled to come out in just a couple of months. And presenting today's topic is Ed Gallagher. Ed is one of our automation specialists with quite a bit of experience. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ed, to get us started.
Okay, great. As Julie mentioned, my name is Ed Gallagher. A little bit, I've been actually, as I put this on writing and look at it, and can't really remember that I've been doing this long, but basically been involved for about 40 years now in automation, back from when PLCs were first getting going, and at least about 20 years working with system integrators, and then another 20 years with as a distributor specialist. So I've actually been involved with Logic since it's been launched. So it's been actually, seems like a long time, but it's actually progressed fairly quickly. So as you can tell, we're 20 years in and we're already up to version 33. So what we're going to do today is a bit of an overview and then go through what new controller and hardware features are being added in version 33. Along with some of the software that's going to go along with it. And then we're going to do a sneak peek on View Designer version 7, which is also launching with it, and potentially some other topics if we get some time. For those that aren't familiar, probably are, Studio 5000 is an actual design suite, so there is multiple components of it. Not all the components get updated with every release. So what we're going to be focusing on today typically is just the Logix Designer, which is the bulk of it if we're doing the programming, and also the View Designer piece, which is also getting it updated this time. We wanted to go through a little bit quick because this is actually changing now. Rockwell's migrating to a software portal for the Studio 5000 purchasing. And they've streamlined it a little bit. It should look fairly familiar, but they've cut it down to basically 3 editions now, the Light, the Standard, and the Professional, with a couple adders thrown in so you can customize it and kind of get what you need. But we went from, I think, 7 down to 3 right now with a couple of adders. The other big change that's coming that might be new to some people is it is now going to be purchased as 2 options. Perpetual with support is kind of what everybody's kind of used to. You buy the license lasts forever, and then you just add support onto it. And coming up through this now, the new first year of support is included in the initial purchase price. That's going back quite a few years when that was the case. And then it's just going to be then an annual renewal of the support for that license. What's different now is we have a subscription option for those that don't want to outright purchase the software. And that is the license and support, and it is on an annual renewal. So you can kind of get up and running without spending as much money on the software. The other option here is, depending on your needs, is you can just buy or subscribe to a license if you don't need it permanently. You may need it for maybe a major project or something. You might need an extra license or 2. So this says you don't have to spend all the money to purchase it. You can just basically lease it for a year or however long you do need it. And this is kind of the consolidation of it. What used to be the previous editions, the kind of the new editions available now, and a couple of the add-ons. With the only thing right now is the Service Edition currently is not available in the portal. So that would be, if you're looking in the software portal, you wouldn't find that yet. And as Julia mentioned, this right now is on the schedule to come out in August. It has been pushed back a month or 2, I think. So originally when we scheduled this May, we were anticipating that this would be out a little closer to this seminar. But unfortunately, Rockwell's had to push back testing a bit to make sure everything's working. So we're looking at August. We're still calling this preliminary, but they pretty well have locked in what's going to be happening with it. And we're just going to go through the highlights of this, and we're going to basically, again, some of the details to come out and follow up with this. Okay. So part of this release is we're pretty excited about. There's a whole new class of controllers being launched. So these are the new class of controllers coming out. We're referring to these as process controllers. So those of you who have been implementing plant PAX systems for the past several years, you do know that we were using our standard controllers and everything that you needed to make it to plant PAX, including library and the objects and the instructions, had to be added in and all done manually. Big feature of this now is that is now being added to the controller. It's part of the software, so we're going to be able to add embedded instructions natively. There's a new task model, and a lot of what you would have had to do manually now is going to be done for you using this new controller. So that'll take a lot of the work out of it and make everything a lot more consistent and easier to manage, because now it's all part and built into the controller. And this will be part of the Plant PAX 5.0 release, which will be coming out in the near future. And so a lot of the details of what we're talking about here will be be coming out in the future. But there's going to be two compact logic controllers that are going to have this capability, along with three control logics, or the 5580, or in this case, we'll call them the 5585s, and different memory sizes. So to just kind of highlight, this is going to be in the near future the current offering of products. As you can see, we have quite a breadth of controllers. And now this adds to what we call the specialized controllers. So typically we've had the guard logics, which is a specialized safety controller. Now we do have a specialized process controller to add to the mix. The other thing coming out with version 33 is redundancy. Redundancy for the L8Z controllers, which have been out for a while now, and it's taken a while to get this into the play, but now you can use the 5580 or the L8Z controllers in a redundancy system. We'll review a little bit of what's going to be new. This is the initial launch features. This is intended to be an additional solution to the current 5570 or the L7X controllers, which aren't going away and are not even planned to be obsolete. But now if you want to be on the latest and greatest platform for new systems, you can now do that if you want, and also incorporate redundancy. It is similar in that we're still going to use the RM2 module. It's going to be done through Studio 5000. Still can put up to 7 communication modules. Big feature using the new controller that they managed to do is that we're not going to use up a lot of the memory that had been done in the past. So a typical would have been that you could have basically almost used up half your memory for redundancy, where now basically it's not going to be a shortcoming. So the full controller, basically memory is going to be available for use, and we're not going to use a lot of the overhead. Something a little different is there's no separate redundancy firmware for this guy now on here. It's the same firmware. It's just going to be a checkbox that you enable redundancy. You don't need to load special firmware. And another big feature is the process controller that we just talked about will be included in this redundancy release. So you can use the process controllers and use them in a redundant system, same as the standard controllers. A couple limitations that they did to keep this compatible and on the initial release is the embedded Ethernet port basically is turned off at this point. So everything will be through additional EN2Ts, kind of like the same way we do it now. SIP security won't be in there. So again, this is kind of the initial release, some new features, some of the legacy communication, and some of the stuff that we could do now. Still available in the 5570, and that still is a viable platform moving ahead. So if we're still looking at needing to do that, we still have an option. If you got a new system where some of that doesn't matter, then you can look at the 5580 as an option. And this is kind of the chart of where it's at and what we're going to support in each one of them, the 70s and the 80s, and also what's kind of planned for the future. The big thing there is going to be enhancements to it to use the port and to use the EN4TR to get gigabit Ethernet involved. So that is planned for future release. Again, this is at V33 is kind of the initial, so we've got some limitations on it. The other big thing, what they've done in version 33 with redundancy is in the past, if you have used it or are familiar with it, is you may have run across that you were doing things that weren't supported and you wouldn't know it until you actually went to download to the controller. So what they've done is they've kind of put the redundancy checks in place and some guide rails. So now basically it's going to do a lot of the verification for you. If you go to enable redundancy on an existing project, it'll tell you what you need to change or what's not supported. And we're not going to go through all of these, but basically it'll perform all the checks. Additionally, it'll do all this to say that it can. So if you do have redundancy turned on, it won't let you do something that you're not allowed to. But if you do have a project and then enable redundancy, it will warn you and tell you what you have to fix before you even get near the stage of where you're going to download to it. So that's a big thing. It kind of helps and make sure you're not running into last minute snag trying to fix a program or do anything you need to right when you're trying to download to it. All right, so version 33 of the software to support all that is going to add some new features, and we're going to kind of go through that. This is a brief snapshot of some of the new stuff we're going to talk about from the process applications or the P controller. We're going to have the new embedded process instructions, and we're not going to go through all of those now. That's going to be for future, but there is a new task model for the process controller, which will create multiple periodic tasks and a structure that's recommended according to the guidelines. In the past, if you had done that, you would have had to done that all on your own. Follow the manual. This way it's been done for you. Also, instruction usage per task, which you couldn't, which kind of helps balance it, some heart, and some productivity enhancements that we'll review is automatic diagnostics. The data preserve download where you can have tag values remain, and some of the stuff that's been out there has been incorporated and some other things. So we'll go through briefly a little bit of an overview of each one. Like I said, we're not going to get too far into depth at this point. This is an example of what's being brought in with the new P controller and the new process functions. So these would have been similar to what was done in the past with the plant PAX library. Problem is you had to import, bring those in, use them in the controller, do all that on your own. Now, as you see out of the box, or at least on the initial release, we're going to have 24 of these included with it. So these are now a native instruction palette to the P controller and everything associated with it. On the right-hand side is a bit of a, what we call a Santa chart. So that's actually one of the functions. As you can see, it's a little hard to see maybe, but it'll give you a good idea to diagnose, and you can tell what's currently going on and the state of each object without having to dive into the underlying code or anything else. Big thing, change on here now is this is a reduced footprint and localization. And a consolidation of libraries. So again, since it's part of the software, you don't need to get a lot of this on your own. Go out and download it with version. So this is going to make implementing a plant PAX system, at least it's the first step now, to make it a more consolidated and easier to implement system and a more consistent system, because again, it's part of the software now, so everything's being controlled for you. And we're planning a future webinar on this for the Plant PAX 5.0 to get more in depth, so stay tuned and watch for that if you're interested in that. Another feature, this isn't related to the process controller. They updated some of the function blocks. If you're familiar with them, they streamlined them. As you can see now, they're a little bit easier, more intuitive. Big benefit is there's actually no backing tag required now. So if you've used function block, when you add them in, creates a backing tag for each one in the program. So when you look at it, you've got all these tags that you really don't do anything with. That kind of went away. So it's a little bit of a streamlining, makes your function blocks a little easier to look at. Not a big deal. The other thing that we are bringing in again is the concept of the extended tag properties. So again, this kind of takes Logic's tags and extends them across the suite all the way out to view and visualization. So now when you define a tag, you can define different extended properties, and these will be migrated out to our HMI elements or anything else. So faceplates, as you can see, some of the examples are the area, and that would be the security area in FactoryTalk View if you're used to it. So again, this is a one place for defining all this, instruction labels, definitions. Makes it a little easier for language switching, because again, everything's done in one place, and this kind of consolidates it. And this is just an example kind of where you look at it and where you would see that in use when you're going to set this up. So this has been added in. We've also taken that and extended it to the embedded FactoryTalk alarm and event tags. So now when you create an alarm tag, you can now again add extended tag properties, and those can now get transmitted out to FactoryTalk View for so the descriptions, alarm descriptions, a lot of the other features. You're not typing them in two different places. You're not adding them in or consolidates them. So once you define a complete tag, everything's included with it. Kind of just gets everything down to making the configuration all in one place. This is another big key feature coming out. If you've been using Logix for a while, the diagnostics. So now we have the ability to do automatic diagnostics, and this would include what you would have had done in the past for, let's say, I/O monitoring or anything else in the I/O tree, to monitor if you lost a connection. That required programming, GSVs and doing some stuff for each item in the I/O tree. Usually took a while. Now you can just turn this on and it will automatically be generated for you. So this is a pretty big feature, big time saver. And it also, again, kind of makes everything kind of consistent approach for it. And it's what we call an automatic device descriptive analytics. So we have additional products and additional things that can use that when it comes up to take all of this stuff, as you see here, maintenance screen and everything that comes out with it. So it drives a consistent approach across the board. It's not something that's getting made up or you have to, turn this into alarm. So this automatically, if you're going to turn this on, can be sent out to and included with the alarm and event database. So this takes a lot of work out of a large system. 64-bit math has been extended. We kind of brought that in on the last release, but now this takes it across the board, I think, for just about all the math instructions. Apparently there's a fairly large need for it. We went from 1632, now we're up to 64-bit. So if you need to do anything with that, that's in there now. And some of the other smaller enhancements are task period display. You can now look right at when you create a periodic task, you can see it'll be displayed along with it, that you can now see what the time period is, so you don't have to open them up every time. FactoryTalk Links has been included as a communication driver for a while. On this release, at least now we're just going to tell you that it's going to be used as default instead of option. It has been in there. Some people may not know. They're still used to using RS Links Classic. FactoryTalk Links has gone through some updates and will be going through an update in the future to pretty well take over what RS Links Classic has been doing. So some of the stuff that still wasn't in there is going to be put in the near future. So in the near future, we're going to be able to see Factory Talk links as the default and included with it. And you may not need to install Links Classic and switch back and forth and use different versions. I know that causes a lot of confusion and trouble sometimes. So that's kind of in here. If you're not familiar with it, like I said, it's going to be on by default, so don't get alarmed. You just need to turn it off. And a little bit with the recent project pass for driving through, it's going to be able to pick your last ones. A little bit of a usability enhancement, not a biggie. The embedded web page control, I know sometimes that's a security risk, or they don't want that available. You used to have to actually program or put a message instruction to turn it off. So they've been asking for it. So now you can basically disable it out of the configuration. Again, just making life a little easier. Don't need to do additional programming. This was actually partially brought out in version 32, but we have it new. Bring it into 33 enhanced heart integration. So with our new IO platform and with some new features, basically you can go draw right through the software, right out and configure your heart device. You don't need any add-ins, plus programming. You don't need any separate tools. So anybody using smart heart devices makes this a lot easier to integrate into the system. Everything's kind of kept in one place. Nothing additional needed. The data preserve download, some of you may already be familiar with. This was actually a separate tool we had to be able to download a new program to the controller, but keep existing tag values. You can make a list and what you wanted to save. Well, that was used a lot on larger systems. So what they did is they incorporated this now as part of the software. It just makes things a little bit easier to get to, a little bit easier to integrate and to use. Okay, so we'll move on to Studio 5000 View Designer. It's actually at version 7 now is being released. And just to reiterate, if you're not familiar, I'm sure probably everybody's heard about it, probably seen the hardware, and maybe you're thinking about it. Unfortunately, like I said, we're still a work in progress to get some of the important features and stuff, but I think we're at a tipping point now, as you'll see in version 7, where we got kind of what's at least a good base set. It may not be everything, but there's a lot of benefits and features to this, so definitely if anybody had been thinking about it, again, and that includes both the 5310 panel view and the 5510. Brief overview. As you can see, we've got a fairly broad range all the way from on the 5310 up to a 12-inch and all the way up to a 19 on this. This is new hardware. As you can see on the 5510, we can do device level ring. We do have some keypad options on that. I think some 120 volt. So again, pretty broad hardware range. Very nice new modern hardware. And now with the View 7 release, we think one of the biggest features that had been lacking, and I know everybody kind of maybe takes it for granted, but unfortunately it hadn't been in there, we're going to add the alarm history viewer. Okay, now the other thing is, if we're not familiar, that's kind of a big deal because that fills out the alarm functionality. And remember that this this HMI doesn't use traditional HMI tags for alarming. We can directly do Logix, either instruction alarms or the new Logix tag alarms, where you totally define the alarms as we just see in Logix, along with descriptions. Everything else is done in one place. Absolutely nothing needs to be done on the HMI. So you don't need to replicate, retype in descriptions, alarms. It just automatically broadcasts out to the panel view. We can do this in Factory Talk View SE, but we never had this capability in Factory Talk View ME or the Panel View Plus. and we won't. So if you're looking at a plant floor HMI level and you want to incorporate factory talk alarms or some of these features, now's time maybe to talk and take a look at this. As you can see, we can take the extended tag properties, a few other nice features again. I mean, larger keypad and a few other things. And again, as you look down at the bottom, we say we're going to adopt factory talk links. Again, kind of the move away from the RS Links Classic. Not that it's going to go away, but everything, finally getting everything to support that. And that was kind of a quick overview. I know we went through pretty quick on the update for the software.
We do have a question that came in over the chat, Ed, regarding the data preserve download feature in V33. But Ashok is asking if you could talk a little more about preserving those online tag values. Specifically, if we work online and download, will previous values show up in the tags?
That actually has been something we've had for quite a while. Like I said, that was a separate tool. So what it is you create a list, and let's say it really only applies to if you're going to need to download a program to the controller. So if you've gone offline, made changes, done something, but yet you've got a running controller, and let's say somebody entered a bunch of set points or anything else, and they don't match up what you have in the program, this list, you can create this list that when it's downloaded, it will take this list of tag values and incorporate that into the controller. So yeah, if you actually made the changes in your offline program to all the tags, you can do that. But like I said, basically it's designed around a system that's been out and running, and for whatever reason you need to download to it, but you may or may not. Now, you can probably pull the uploads in and do everything else. But this is kind of designed around setting up a list, or you create these list of tags. So anytime you want to go ahead and download to the controller, you kind of have this, and you don't need to remember to upload, or did I get the latest values, or did all that. This kind of takes that out of the equation. Like I said, it's typically for larger, continuously running systems where you may need to do that. And like I said, this has been out. It's been a separate tool. So a lot of people either didn't know it was there, didn't use it, and they've just taken it and incorporated it into it.
So we do have an extra minute. Ed, I know you had put a couple of slides in the back end here on a little bit of a separate application code manager. There are a few updates here. Did you want to just touch on this since we have a minute?
Sure. This is another, again, another feature of the studio. A lot of people aren't familiar with this. It's a utility or an addition for, it's basically a library management. So OEMs, integrators, you may have a lot of code, objects, faceplates, your own, other than, let's say, a plant PAX. So this gives you a way to manage that and make it reusable. So you can reuse these objects, add new tag names to them, drive consistency. It's actually included with, or basically you can do it. The first single user license you can load doesn't require an additional license. So if you want to try it out, it is available. It is an addition. So if you want to get into multi-user, that's when additional licenses would be required. You can have librarians who manage it, users that can take that content. Otherwise, it would be done on an individual basis. Kind of makes it defeats the purpose, but at least there's a way to take a look at it and get started. So again, this is and again, it can include Logix content, the programming, HMI content, your own faceplates, anything you do. It can include historian tags. So if you have an object ultimately that you want to collect and go up this story, and that can all be included with it. So it's kind of encompassing in a Rockwell Factory Talk system that the objects can kind of self-generate everything needed at the different levels. Makes it easier and kind of a fair amount of work getting it up and running. But, again, once you get into that. So there were a couple there's a new release V3 coming out. The big thing with this is that library objects, there may be some additional, example here is a tank object that has multiple valve objects. Well, in the past, you would have had to typically bring those all in independently. Now you can create a hierarchy of your low-level blocks linked to the other ones, and then they can basically now come in as single elements. Just makes it a lot easier to use. So certainly if anybody wants to take a look at this, let us know. And it is available. Like I said, if you have the software, it is doesn't require a license for a single user to load it and start using it on their computer. If you want to start sharing libraries or get into the full-blown, then that would be additional licensing required. So, okay, I think that well buttons it up.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you.